But I think we both know what men are like.
In 1980, Stanley Kubrick released The Shining, based on the novel by Stephen King.
Hey, wasn't it around here that the Donner Party got snowbound?
I think that was farther west in the Sierras.
What was the Donner Party?
They were a party of settlers in covered wagon times. They got snowbound one winter in the mountains. They had to resort to cannibalism in order to stay alive.
You mean they ate each other up?
They had to, in order to survive.
Jack, don't worry, Mom. I know all about cannibalism. I saw it on TV.
See? It's okay. We saw it on the television.
It's only in 1966, Kubrick grandly declared that he intended one day to make the scariest movie ever made. I think to him it was like a challenge. You know, you must step up. He liked that idea of a kind of primal response to images rather than an intellectual one. Could you create images that were just frightening in their own right without having to explain them?
The Shining is certainly one of the most original horror films ever made, one which transfixes you throughout its length, gradually turning the screw, and the fact that some of the most horrific moments or frightening moments are seen through the eyes of a child is another thing which really makes it very powerful. I think it's one of the most successful films he ever made, and some would say the best film he ever made.
Here's Johnny!
Kubrick would follow up The Shining with a return to a war setting with 1987's Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket sees Stanley Kubrick returning, in a sense, to his roots. He was always going back to anti-war movies. So he'd go off and explore every genre, but in the end, the films that he kept returning to, the themes that he kept returning to, were a rejection of war, rejection of violence. And Full Metal Jacket is about the Vietnam War. It's got Matthew Modine as a young soldier who goes through the process of square bashing. He's yelled at by his drill instructor. He heads out to Vietnam, and he's there in the middle of the Tet Offensive. A lot of Vietnam movies are set in the jungle. This one is set in the city, which gives it a very different feel. It's the beginning of a re-understanding of what Vietnam is. It's a showing of Vietnam in guts and horror kind of way, in a way that previously America had been doing quite obliquely with films like MASH. They've been talking about something else but referencing Vietnam. So it took a long time for America to come to terms, and Kubrick really helped show the way.
After Full Metal Jacket, it would be 12 years before the release of Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut.
Do you know anyone here?
Not a soul.
Why do you think Ziegler invites us to these things every year?
This is what you get for making house calls.
It's a film that if you go back to, you draw more and more from. There's a lovely cameo from Sidney Pollack. There's lovely, intense Kubrick visuals, great interiors. I mean, they rebuilt New York streets on the back lot of Pinewood. It has all the kind of ingredients, yet on a much more kind of intimate level. In many ways, it's a similar film to Lolita. You know, it's about human lust and human passion and the intellect coming in conflict with one another. Sadly, it would be his last ever film. 6 days after handing it in to Warner Brothers, he had a heart attack and died. And sort of maybe symbolically, you know, having made a film, that great last expression, he was ready to go, you know. You know, it's a film that, like 2001, has its own mythology. They shot for years. You know, he shot endlessly and repeatedly, almost to the point of a little bit of madness. I think it's sort of imbued into Eyes Wide Shut. And sadly, I think in a way, when the film finally arrived, the Kubrick moment had slightly gone, and it was respectfully received and received with curiosity, but it wasn't an event like it used to be. And in some ways, Eyes Wide Shut is a little bit lost in the mix of those films. I think it's seen more as an oddity in Tom Cruise's career than it is the final film by Stanley Kubrick. But it is still a very, very interesting film.
But may I ask, what is the password for the house?
The password for the house?
Yes?
I'm sorry, I seem to have forgotten it.
That's unfortunate. Because here, it doesn't matter whether you have forgotten it, or if you never knew it.
He was a great director. Visually, his editing was incredible. He could get performances from people who you would not suspect would give great performances. In every way, he was an innovative director.
Each time he enters a genre, he changes the way that genre is shown forever. So he enters space, changes the way space is depicted. Enters horror, changes what horror is. He's always redefining what's possible.
He absorbed from the greatest. He absorbed and understood Eisenstein. He absorbed and he understood the way filmmakers can actually innovate and use it, and he turned them to his own advantage.
He was a great technical innovator. He did not have any fear in terms of pushing the boundaries of the technology. He understood the camera intrinsically, understood what cameras did. He understood what they were for.
His films are, you know, remarkable just as kind of experiences. He's someone who truly took the nature of film to the borders of classical music, of abstraction. Yet at the same time, they're wonderfully enjoyable films as well. You know, they're full of funniness and dialogue and great acting, you know. He wasn't a man who neglected moviness for art. He was both things, but he was unique.